Hi guys, this is Jeff, AD7LN, and today's radio room lesson for Elmer time will be about your basic radio tools in the radio room for those just starting out on the transmitting side of radio. And then we'll go to some very helpful websites that I go to all the time for accessing information. So stay tuned. Okay, starting off with radio room tools. Keep in mind some of the tools are not up on here because this table is so small. Speaking of, first one on the list that I have here is dummy load. The dummy load definitely is a good tool for the new and the seasoned ham, or anyone using a transmitting radio, for the fact of tuning the radio on transmit without having to send the RF into open space, sending the transmit into the dummy load while tuning. You can get different sized dummy loads from different manufacturers. Some dummy loads are built into antenna tuners, so keep that in mind. If you plan on getting an antenna tuner, check to see if it has a dummy load built in. Also check to make sure that the wattage input rating is high enough to allow for whatever wattage output the transmitting radio has, and for how long it can take it. Some dummy loads only will handle a large amount of wattage input for a very short time, so keep that in mind as well. And over here, let me move over to the other side of the table. Soldering irons. We have a very small 12-watt pencil soldering iron here for your circuit boards, surface mount device, removal, replace, repair. Then we go up to a higher wattage Weller. I believe this one's a 35 watter. This would be good for soldering wires, repair of wires, soldering on terminals, 2 wires. Here's some terminals. Some of your larger wire soldering chores would be done with this one. And then you have the soldering gun, which is 150 watt on low and 230 watts on high on this particular model. This gets used a lot for when you are soldering wires onto large pieces of metal, or if you're making coax jumpers. If you have the wire and you cut the wire down and wire the end onto the RG58 or RG8 or whatever kind of coax you're running and whatever kind of connector you're putting on, you will find that the hotter soldering gun will get the job much faster. Okay. Oh, also make sure you've got some good electronics solder. This is some old silver solder that works great for me. Various gauges of wire on spools. Well, I didn't bring the spools up, but I do have some different gauges of wire here. I got some red and blue, or red and black here. I have other gauges for making dipole wire antennas and such, but the wire can also be used for repair on whatever electronic item that you're doing. And this is just basic electronic wiring. This is not technician electronics. This is just basic radio hobbyist stuff here. And we go on to terminals and connectors. Once again, I've got a big box here of different terminals. You'll find in the hobby that you will use a lot of these. However, it's best to put them on the end of the wire correctly with solder, and sometimes even with heat shrink tubing. If the connector on the end here, the plastic end, doesn't work out, breaks off or what have you, you can cover this end area here with heat shrink tubing. And when you do that, you would need a heat gun. Here's an old heat gun. A little noisy, but still works. Be careful with it because it's very hot. Instantaneously. But yeah, heat guns are great for heat shrink tubing. And what do we got next on the list here? We have a VOM. Okay, here is the VOM that I am using. VOM stands for volt ohm meter. This performs various tasks. It is by far one of the most used tools, even for a newbie in the radio electronics scene. It obviously will check voltage, both DC and AC. Checking the current, you can check the resistance, the capacitance, also continuity, even continuity. You find that you want to check continuity a lot on different things, even coax. After a coax has been assembled with new plugs on the end, new connectors on the end, you want to check to see if it was done right and there are no shield wires touching the internal center conductor. If so, the whole coax jumper is trash. It has to be done over again. But you can check that with this before you put it on a radio and burn up the radio. So that's why you have this. A quality wire stripper / crimper. I have various models of wire strippers and crimpers. This particular one's a Matco. It's been lasting quite a long time. I have a Klein Tools wire cutter and crimper. And here's another minute, tiny electronics cutter for wires and electronics. So, always used quite a bit. And talking about soldering, if you get too much solder on something, solder on a circuit board, you need a way to take it off. And the way I prefer is through a solder sucker. Very easy to use device. You just get the solder hot with the soldering iron of choice, and while the solder is in a molten liquid state, you put this up to it and it sucks the solder right out. Great little tool. You find them everywhere in electronic stores and online. The helping hand with magnifier right here. Use this a lot for wiring, for rewiring of microphones, because it can hold the wire so that you don't have to, while holding the microphone plug end and soldering. And multiple other reasons to have this for soldering. Magnification always helps because it makes your job easier and more correct. And for people like me that are up in age, I find that sometimes some magnification glasses are useful. So I had to break down and get those a couple years ago. And let's see here, various screwdrivers of all types and sizes, flatheads, Phillips. I've got multiple tiny screwdrivers, larger ones. I've got a whole bin over there at the radio desk. You name it, I've got the size. And I have some over here, professional style. And yeah, they get used. They get used a lot when you're in radio electronics. When you're taking off the back of a radio to adjust something or to clean out, or if you're a little bit higher up into radio electronics, the radio hobby, you can align some of those coils. And that's some of my alignment tools, just to show what those look like there. And needle nose pliers. These things are so valuable for moving wires, holding circuits, or, holding a resistor, a capacitor, what have you, while you're soldering it. This becomes your extension of your hand. And you can see by this, it has been used for many years and very well. And that tool is a part of my hand when I'm doing electronics. Heat sink compound, possibly if you're also higher up into the hobby and you're replacing transmit finals. Always good to have some heat sink compound on hand. This is basically the size of most tubes you see, sometimes a little larger. You don't use very much anyway, so it goes a long ways. Electrical tape. There's always electrical tape in this radio room for wrapping wires, keeping wires together, connectors that seem to be so-so and you didn't get heat shrink tubing on it. You can throw some electrical tape on it for a temporary fix so that there's no electrical contact between metal surfaces. Pardon that interruption there. The battery went out. So let's start off with the shortwave radio. Portable shortwave radio, very inexpensive. Covers the full HF band and sideband within that full shortwave band. Standard music style headphones plugged into this. You can transmit your HF radio into a dummy load, low power, and adjust your audio during transmit and listen to your audio on this. And it's just a standard Japanese made, I believe it's Japanese made, could be China's. Oh, this is a Chinese made. Good quality though. And headphones, can't remember where I bought them, but they're a good sounding headphone. Great tuning aid, better than interfering with other operators on the air by transmitting over the air and listening to your own transmission while interfering with everybody else that's talking on the air. So, HF radio headphones. Bare minimum for HF. I guess this also applies for anything above HF, and that is standing wave meters, SWR meters. This particular one is for 144 to 220 megahertz. This is an old one by Radio Shack. It was designed for CB radio operators back in the day, but it does cover the whole HF band, so it's just a low power one. And here is one that covers 1.8 to 525 megahertz. These are good for, while making an antenna, tuning it for the lowest standing wave, and checking to see if whatever antenna you're running is providing a good standing wave. It's also good for checking. You know, once every so many months, throw one of these in line and check your antenna system. Make sure it's running properly and you're not transmitting into a bad situation and burning up your radio. If you're transmitting at anything above HF, specifically 144 megahertz and up into the UHF 440 megahertz and higher, it's okay to use these in line to check the antenna, but it's best to take them out of line once you've checked, because you will notice a loss in RF on the higher frequencies. In HF, on the HF bands, you can leave these standing wave meters in line and you won't notice anything, as long as you've got good connections and good jumpers. But these are a valuable tool for checking the antenna and the coax. If the coax is bad, it's going to give you a bad standing wave as well. So there's that. And if, I'm saying a big if you have some money, an antenna analyzer. I know these are expensive. They make them in different frequency limits. This one goes up to 55 megahertz. The whole HF band up to 55. They make more expensive models that go way up into 1,000, 2,000 megahertz. But they're pretty spendy. But anyway, when you're building an antenna, these cut the time down in half compared to using a standing wave meter to check your antenna for compatibility with the radio. It's just it's a hands down thing. If you can afford one of these. This particular one's made by Rig Expert. I'm not trying to sell it. There are other manufacturers, MFJ. There's the Micro VNA. There's a couple of different manufacturers out there that make an antenna analyzer, and I can tell you it's a great tool, and I'm glad to finally be able to afford one of those, because it makes antenna making a breeze and fun. And with that, the last thing I would put on the list here is a good notebook and some writing utensils, pens, pencils. You should always have that at the ready when you're on a radio, because you could be hearing some information from somebody that you would want to use for your hobby. If you just want to register what you're hearing or who you're hearing, so that you've got their call sign, you can just read it right back to them for the confirmation. Always good to have pencil and paper right there at the radio. So with that, I think that's a pretty good basic listing of what a radio operator would have for just the basics for tools. So with that, let's go to the Elmer Time dry board, and I've got the big list of internet websites that I go to, and I'll tell you all about them. Okay, let's get into the list here. These are some of the most used internet addresses that I go to for any kind of radio related lookup for whatever kind of information I'm looking for. So I'll tell you a little bit about them as I go down the list here. First one on the line here is the short-wave.info. That particular website is excellent for looking up any kind of international broadcast transmission that you're hearing over the air at the time you're listening to it. You can type in the frequency on their webpage and it will tell you who is transmitting, where they're transmitting from, how many watts, and how far away it is from you, which is kind of nice. Of Great for international broadcast listening. Highly recommend it. QRZ.com. Obviously, for ham operators, it's the go-to for looking up anybody's call sign, so you can find out where they are at, so you can send them a QSL card. You can find out their email address if you're logged in and have an account with QRZ.com. There is a buy and sell section on QRZ.com. You can buy used equipment, used ham equipment. It's great. Tons of information. Lots of radio related stories, news. You guess it, it's probably on there. RadioReference.com. This is, how can I say it? They have a huge bank of stored frequencies on their website for just about everything. And there is a system used through RadioReference.com for updating some of these newer police scanners, such as the Uniden models, BCD 436HP, and the 536 mobile, the SDS 100, SDS 200. There's a computer program that you can link up to those radios, and they will go to the RadioReference.com frequency base, and every Monday it gets reloaded with new information, if needed, if there is new information. So those scanners are always up to date if you have that program and up to date, update your scanners. Anyway, and they also have forums, so you can talk about local radio, what's going on in your area, and any kind of radio that there would be for the hobby, whether it's trains, aircraft, police, fire, medical, ham, anything. There's a forum based on it on RadioReference.com. Check it out. eham.net. They have a lot of great reviews by ham radio operators on ham radio style products. Some are ham radio, some are just accessories for ham radio. Sometimes it's just a HF shortwave portable. All sorts of electronics that deal with the radio hobby. Great place to go look for something. If you plan on buying or purchasing a radio product, look it up on eham.net first. See what everybody else says about it before purchasing it. Next one, aprs.fi. If you're into APRS, you'll find that the aprs.fi gives you a great map and minute-by-minute updated map. If anybody is traveling with an APRS setup if they're walking with an APRS radio, if they're bicycling, motorcycling, driving in a car, flying in an airplane, in a balloon, whatever, it's going to show you an exact track through the GPS system in most of these newer radios, and it'll transmit the APRS GPS coordinates, and it'll get to aprs.fi, and it'll show you on a map where they're at, where they're going. Pretty fun. Sherwood Engineering, sherwang.com/table. This particular one will make a lot of ham radio operators cry because it gives you a flat-out test of hundreds of different radios that have just come out to the ones that have been out for many, many years. Transceivers and receivers. This company lab tests every radio for their received performance. Starting at the top of the list, the best, to the bottom of the list, the mediocre. And you're going to find out that some of these really expensive radios are down near the middle to the bottom of the list. So be prepared when you go to that website. swling.com, great site for reviews of shortwave portable radios. From the old ones to the brand new ones, the ones that are just going to come out soon. They give an in-depth review of all these radios, and they will put them up against other radios so that you can actually hear them against other radios through the wave files, which is nice. hfunderground.com. If there's anything being transmitted out on the HF airwaves that is not ham related or standard international broadcast, you're going to find people registering what's going on this website right here, HF Underground. Pirate stations, marine, you name it. People are keeping track of it. They're logging it on this website. Also a forum setup. amsat.org, if you're interested in what's above us and floating around the Earth, that's ham related, all the ham satellites, including the International Space Station, you can find the frequencies of what satellites are in operation, both the uplink and downlink. You can also find the Keplerian elements, which you will need if you get a tracking program on your computer, because the tracking program has to be updated so that you're tracking on time of whatever satellite you're looking for. Tons of information. Great place to start out for any kind of space-related radio, listening or transmitting. issfanclub.eu. This is the third version of this site. It used to be the Mir fan club when the Mir space station was up. I was part of that fan club. Then it went to the International Fan Club, International Space Station Fan Club. Anyway, this site has all the information you need for locating, transmitting, listening to the International Space Station, the newest information, news, and if it's International Space Station related with radio, here's where you go. ARRL.org. Again, another famous website for radio operators. You will find a tremendous amount of information and the newest news relating to ham radio on that site. You can also download the newest band plan for ham radio through the top of the band to the high end. HF up, I think I'm not really sure when the last one was up, but I'll show you that in here in just a second. Last one, Repeaterbook.com. If you can't get a hold of the ARRL repeater guides that are out, next best thing is Repeaterbook.com. You can find repeaters in your area. You can find listings of repeaters both for ham radio and GMRS. Repeaters in the United States, Canada, and around the world. Great reference material there as well. So there's just a small list of many of the websites that I frequent, and I hope you can use some of them. I do all the time. So anyway, that's it for tonight. You have a great day or a great night, depending on where you're at. And I'll catch you next time. This is Alpha Delta 7 Lima November. Jeffrey. I'm out of here. Bye.